Today's collectible spot, we are having a look at the Medicom Toys Mafex Batman v Superman. This is figure number 24, Wonder Woman action figure. Wonder Woman comes with a slew of different accessories. It looks like she comes with not one, but possibly two lassos. Oh, no, three lassos, because we've got the one over here as well. A shield, a sword, multiple interchangeable hands, and of course, though you probably can't see it, she's got a clear display stand as well. Down below is an image of what the figure will look like. And on the side of the box, you've got Mafex Wonder Woman action figure, Batman v Superman. This is now completing the trio that we've already had a look at. We looked at also the Superman and Batman in an earlier video. Back of the package shows you how you can pose the figure. Oh, actually, it's one lasso. One lasso right here. So you actually get one for housing on the side and then one for her holding. It actually did look like it was two lassos looking at in the packaging there. To check out more from the folks over at Medicom Toys, head over to www.medicomtoy.co.jp, and you can also find a comics shop locator, www.comicsshoplocator.com, if you'd like to find a comic book store in your area. Spot's going to take a break and get this opened up. When we come back, though, we're going to get a better look at the Medicom Toys Mafex Batman v Superman figure 24 Wonder Woman. There's more anyway, guys. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. Before we have a look at the Amazonian warrior, let's first have a look at the display stand that comes included with the figure. Yes, it is the same display stand as both the Batman and Superman, respectively, that we've already looked at on this channel. A somewhat square or rectangular, I should say, shaped base, clear in nature, and then it has three pegs, 1 and 2, with the third being at the top, that you can adjust and move around the clear or supplied clear neck that also is included as well. The neck has a hinge at the bottom, a hinge at the midpoint, and a hinge at the top. Additionally to that, there's a rotation that you can rotate the top portion here, depending on if you want to have, you know, Wonder Woman flying or whatnot. And then this also opens and closes to support the waist on the figure. So we just, for example, clip this into place like that. Not always the most secure fits, in fact. A lot of times you may find this, and I've noticed this with my Batman, that this joint here becomes a little loose. The little neck portion here becomes loose. So what I've done, and I've done this now a couple of times, adjust the figure. You know, for example, if you want to have her flying or you know, leaping, lunging, for example. And then I've gone in with a screwdriver and I've tightened the screw on the side here. Just to tighten it up, just so that this doesn't get as loose. Because it does get loose over time. It's already starting to develop a loose, slightly floppy nature with Batman. And Superman fairly recently picked him up, so I haven't had any problems with his display base. Wonder Woman's, I find, for some reason, her base, like the figure actually, is very loose. Very, very loose. Actually, we'll just move that stand out of the way. Before we look at the rest of the accessories, I do want to look at the figure first. Now, at the same time that I picked up the Superman, I picked up Wonder Woman. I picked up actually both figures at the same time at my local comic book store. I was really interested in getting this Superman, but more importantly, really was psyched to pick up Wonder Woman because having seen images of her, I thought she was the better looking figure. And now that I physically have her in hand, that actually does reinforce my initial opinion that is a far superior looking figure. There's nothing really wrong with the Superman, no, none whatsoever. Other than, you know, the paint, the tone that he used for his skin tone, I think is a little too on the orangey side. This is a fairly accurate representation here of the Gal Gadot Wonder Woman. It's interesting that how some companies, you could have 3 or 4 different companies churning out the same licensed property, and some do it better than others. I mean, case in point, this is just a plastic sculpted head, and yet it's loads better. It's ton more accurate than like the Mattel releases. That I think to myself, well, geez, maybe what you could always do is shave off some of the funds getting the retail released figures and maybe save up and get something like these. They're smaller, yes, but they're still superposable. And personally speaking, I think the head sculpt is much better. Some also criticized too the Play Arts Kai releases of the figures where they were really, really weak. And truthfully, the Wonder Woman, if you saw my review of the Wonder Woman from Play Arts Kai, I did feel like the figure was weak. Very frail feeling, like the plastic felt unfinished, and the head sculpt wasn't the greatest. The Medicom, however, released of Wonder Woman I think is very, very good. Both in the skin tone, the face likeness is dead on, and the plastic, though it's a little loose, I think just by nature of the fact that the figure is a little thinner, she's a little more spindly, but she has all the articulation where you would need it. Now let's go through the different accessories that she comes included with, then we'll kind of go back and look at more of the figure. Some of the accessories she comes included with is her shield, for example. Shield is adorned in nice gold and metallic silver with a darker gray at the back. And it just can fit over through her hands. Actually, this hand is not the greatest of hand to be holding it because there is hands suited for holding the shield. For example, this hand right here, you can get around the little clip here, or the little loop that's part of her shield. I'm just putting it in her hand just for the time being so you can see how for the most part it sits in her hand. Keeping in mind, again, this would be a little bit more secure. The other thing that she comes included with as well is a trusty sword, which you may or may not be able to make out, but some nice coloring with the gold and the silvers, with a slightly different departure in this bluish silver that's made up of the handle portion here. Lastly, she has two variations of the lasso, which initially I thought was three. She has the more closed off lasso, which you can move her arm out of the way and very easily fit down on the clip portion of the little strap that goes across her chest. We'll just take the shield off for the time being. The other lasso, we'll just put that to the side. The other lasso is more of a stretched out lasso that actually has loops on both sides. You could probably see why initially I thought that this was going to be two lassos in the packaging, as they look like they're almost mirror copies of one another, but they are in fact one lasso that stretches from one end to the other and then just looped off. Then, to get you going, she has a series of interchangeable hands as well. A total actually of 6 hands. We'll just get her to stand here for a second. There we go. She has a total of 6 hands. Hands ranging from one suited for holding, for example, the sword, one for holding the shield, a couple of also open hands if you want something a little bit more dynamic, and another variation to a weapon or accessory holding hand. Changing out the hands, super easy. Just go ahead and wiggle the hand. And actually, these ones you don't even have to wiggle. I felt like the Superman, you really had to wiggle to get off. This one you just slide off. But do put it on with some caution, as the clip is so small, you don't want that accidentally breaking. Let's find an adequate hand that we could have her holding something with. Wiggle this back on. Sometimes the peg does slide around a lot on you. It just pops back and forth. So wiggling, I find, sometimes is the easiest, as opposed to just pushing it on. For starters, pushing it on runs the risk of breaking the peg, but it also hinges the peg back and forth. If you just kind of wiggle it on, it seems to stay enough in place that you can get something going here. And let's see if we can get the sword in her hand. There we go. I'll probably likely display her with the sword and probably with her shield as well. We'll do that as also while we're at it. Let's find the hand for the shield. I guess you could probably use this one right here. Wiggle this on. And remember what I said, don't push it on. Just kind of grab the peg slightly with your thumb and your pointer finger and just wiggle this on. That way it keeps it a little bit more stable. It's not hinging all over the place, and then you don't accidentally break it either. And we'll go ahead and slide the shield on here. There we go. And we can fit that into place, just like that. Now she's actually going to hold the shield. It's not going to go anywhere. And then from there you can angle it, angle her hands, her head. Again, you can have her lunging if you so wish. Really, you can do so much with these figures because they're superposable. We'll just kind of move all the accessories out of the way. For a comparison, by the way, just adjust her legs, adjust her arm, bring out her sword. For comparison, let's bring in the Superman that we had a look at as well. I love the Superman. I really think, though, I love the Wonder Woman the most out of the three figures that we had a look at. Does a lot of things well. She's loose, you know, some of the hinges and stuff like that makes for a slightly floppy figure, but as a whole, I think sculpt-wise and paint, she is the best of the three. Superman's no slouch, though. I'm not dismissing Superman, but I think of the three, my favorite is Wonder Woman. Let's go through her articulation, shall we? Her head is on a ball joint, no issues whatsoever right there. Her hair, as you could probably expect it though, when you move the hair, this sorts the butt up against the back shoulder area, so you can't really move it too much past that point. She has an upper torso ball joint. She has a lower torso ball joint. Her arms hinge out, which I guess is one problem I have with the figure. If I move the figures to the side, the head, we look at the shoulder portion. Now, in order to accommodate a fairly forgiving, I should say, posability in her arm, it unfortunately means that you've got a big noticeable ball joint sticking out from this gap in her shoulders. It's unfortunate. You don't see it as much from the front, but if you rotate it ever so slightly to the back, you can see this big, even like bringing the arm down, a big noticeable gap where the ball joints are attaching themselves to the socket. A small little nitpick. This can go up and down too, so you can do your best to try to hide that if you wish, so it just doesn't become as noticeable. It's a bummer that it's there, but for the sake of what it needs to do, I can understand why it has to be there. It's just somewhat of a shame. She has a double hinge on the elbow. You can have a nice little pose going on there with her sword. She has a rotation and hinge in the hand. Her legs, like the arms, get a little floppy from time to time. I'll just take the shield off for the time being. They get a little floppy because, unfortunately, these can come down. And I guess it's just for additional, posability. You can bring those legs a little bit more further up this way. But these also get a little loose. Like these legs just kind of fall out of the sockets very easily just by nature of what they need to do for the figure. She has a double hinge on the knee. She also has a hinge and ankle pivot, slight ankle pivot in the foot. There's no actual hinge on the toes like Superman did have. But that's okay. Yeah, as a whole, I really like this figure. Like I could just rhyme off the figures that this figure is so much better than. The Play Arts Kai figure, this figure is much better than. Smaller, yes. The Play Arts Kai, its benefit is just the fact that it's large. It's a nice, large version of Wonder Woman, but I think this one is so much better. And this one also blows the Mattel retail release, for obvious reasons. It blows the retail released Mattel figures out of the water. Sure, you'd be looking at quantity versus quality. Quantity, you could get so many more Mattel figures for about a $10 price point. This Wonder Woman I picked up at the comic book store, I think she was about $70. Somewhat expensive to, if you look at it that way. But if you also think of it this way, if you had bought, say, even 5 figures of the Mattel releases, factoring tax and everything else like that, you spent just as much for, I think, lesser, weaker looking representations of the Amazonian warrior here. If you can spend a little bit extra and get one version of Wonder Woman rather than 5 or 6 versions of Batman and 5 or 6 versions of Superman, I think this is where money should be spent. Quality figures like this, little on the loose side, I can't overlook that. But overall, really good figures, and something that displaying these, I would much more display a Wonder Woman than 5 or 6 Mattel releases, or even like the Play Arts Kai figure. I would display this one before I would display the Play Arts Kai release. Again, I found this at my local comic book store. If you are interested in picking this up for yourself, you can check out your local comic book stores as well. I think some of these are also showing up hit or miss. I think I've seen some Medicom releases showing up at Toys R Us too. Not necessarily this one, but it gives you some idea if you want to be looking for these also. Today's collectible spot, though, we're looking at the Medicom toys. This was the Mafex Batman v Superman, and this one I think was figure 24. Yes, figure 24. This was Wonder Woman. Stay tuned, guys. Spot's going to have more collectible spots and other videos heading your way. Thanks for watching. See you next time.